Hello, everybody. It is my pleasure and privilege to kick off the ONF Spotlight 2020 event with the first segment focused on broadband. Assuming Charles Dickens would not mind, I'm going to adapt his opening lines from The Tale of Two Cities. It was the worst of times, it is the best of times. It was the winter of despair, it is the summer of hope. No one needs a reminder that we are going through a pretty terrible pandemic. It has brought upon unparalleled scale of loss of life and misery to the world. It has also delivered a serious disruption to the world's economies. Like the frontline workers who we have applauded, I believe we, the networking and telecommunications industry, are in a unique position to help by bringing our unique skills to bear. The growing digital divide in the world is well documented between the urban and the rural communities in every country, between the affluent and the economically challenged segments of the population of the country, and also between the developed and the developing nations. This pandemic has cast a spotlight on this divide's ominous shadow. The portion of the society which is most impacted by this crisis is also almost amongst the most underserved by reliable broadband. Our industry and government collectively can and must try to find a way to help the society to function under such constrained circumstances and ultimately be better prepared for future crises and challenges. The move to teleworking, online education, telemedicine, esports, etc., had started a while back. But this pandemic has given these trends urgency. With most nations implementing various forms of shelter-at-home regulations, many essential activities have been driven online and into people's homes. This has forced the society to fundamentally reimagine how we work, we learn, socialize, and get entertained. Finally, the debate whether residential broadband is a luxury or a necessity is settled. And herein lies the silver lining that precipitates an opportunity from the current crisis. As social norms and business practices change, it is widely expected that these behaviors will survive the pandemic and create a new normal. As I talk to operators like DT and others and ecosystem players, it is clear that this emergency is serving as rocket fuel, accelerating their plans for widespread broadband deployments and upgrades. Let's characterize what it'll take to support this new normal. It is clear that the world requires more than 15% penetration, which is the current level of the penetration of the world as measured by Statistica. On the left, you see the chart. Also, large portion of those with broadband are underconnected with respect to the speed of the service and the quality of the service. Researchers estimate that full duplex speeds between 300 megabits per second and 1 gigabit per second with low latency will be required for applications of the future that incorporate AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, and 360-degree video delivery. As the chart on the right shows, we are quite a ways away from this speeds and this average broadband services. Luckily, this reality is not lost on government nor on the industry leaders. So before we look at their response to this ask and this requirements for the new normal, a quick look back allows us to frame this opportunity with historic perspective. In the past century, the 20th century, the world has had many similar inflection points that prompted massive infrastructure investments. By the end of World War II, about 40% of Japan's industrial plants and infrastructure were destroyed. After World War II ended, for more than a decade, Japan consistently reinvested up to 30% of the GNP in capital equipment infrastructure. This laid the foundation for what we call the Japanese economic miracle of today. Another example, in the mid-50s, with the backdrop of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the US government passed the National Interstate and Defense Highways Act. In 1991, about 30 years later, when this project was deemed complete, at the total cost of about $129 billion, 41,000 miles of highways and interstates were built. While this project's primary motivation was to enable rapid movement of US military assets, the highway system has had a much more profound impact on US competitiveness and culture in the 20th century. There are many more examples like this, a couple of them being the Panama Canal and the Pan-European railway system. These are examples of large public and private infrastructure investments that have borne out major societal benefits. Now let's go back to our topic of the day and look at how the world is reacting to the urgent need for better broadband. The pandemic, as well as the recent rapid advances in cloud-delivered services, everything as a service moniker has been often used, have created an inflection point for ultra broadband investment. In the US, a broadband infrastructure investment to the tune of $100 billion is being discussed by the federal government as part of its pandemic economic stimulus plan. In Europe and other places in the world, many tier 1 operators, including Deutsche Telekom, Turk Telecom, British Telecom, and Telefonica, are actively enhancing their broadband infrastructures, and you'll soon hear from Deutsche Telekom, and Turk Telecom will talk about it tomorrow in their keynote. Similarly, multi-billion-dollar broadband programs are underway in the rest of the world. Reliance Jio in India, NTT Rakuten in Japan, Virgin Media in UK, NBN in Australia, to name a few. The European Commission has several funding mechanisms for accelerating broadband. The $27 billion fund called the Connecting Europe Facility is an example of that. Though in general, Europe tends to have higher reliance on private funding for bridging the digital divide. And the World Bank suggests that Africa will require $100 billion in investment to achieve universal and affordable internet access. This is what I call the world's $1 trillion opportunity and the $1 trillion broadband moment. This is really a big deal. To kind of imagine what that $1 trillion means, it is amazing to hear that $1 trillion can fund the militaries of all the NATO countries combined. So that's how big this thing is. And it's an opportunity for us to grab and capitalize on. I don't want to offend any of my telecom operator friends and leaders who are on the call and who I talk to them regularly, but the telecom operators have faced serious headwinds over the past couple of decades. Most are having a hard time maintaining healthy margins as demand for data grows at higher rates than revenue. The reliance on proprietary hardware-centric infrastructure has impeded their abilities to react to new demand, and often critical upgrades and new service introductions take months to roll out. As a result, most of the value from the network infrastructure has not accrued to the network operator, thus eroding their profitability. In fact, if you let me digress for a second, if you look at the over-the-top players like Zoom, the platform we are using today for this webinar, and Netflix, look at their price to earnings ratio, which is a common Wall Street or financial metric for profitability and growth, and their market cap, you will see this stark difference. 100, for Zoom Video Communications, the company which is less than 10 years old, is worth almost as much as Deutsche Telekom, Germany, and has 100 times more of a PE ratio than AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon. Following the old playbook is unlikely to get the operators out of this negative spiral, is the message I want to convey. So, as operators and the governments embark on this new broadband infrastructure build out, they would be ill-advised to deploy precious public and private funds, however large they may be, without thinking through several key questions. What is the correct way to enable universal ultra broadband? We surely don't want to build a bridge to nowhere. So when it comes to access technology, one size does not fit all. What technology works in Mumbai does not work in Mississippi. How the citizens of Switzerland would be wired up with ultra broadband may not work for Cyprus. Leaders should think value backwards, not technology forwards. What is the right architecture? It is in the public interest to make the access architecture to be flexible, modular, and incrementally upgradable so that it can service millions of customers and provide services to the unconnected and underconnected for at least the next 10 years, ideally a lot more. What services should they plan for in supporting this on this ultra broadband connection? This is a hard question because no one knows what is going to come next. We have heard of AR, VR, and 3D video becoming a dominant application of tomorrow, as it is today. We are seeing a lot of live video being produced from people's homes. First time in the history, the upload or the bandwidth going from the home to the cloud is now nearing the download bandwidth. So, but it is fair to say that if you provision for a 300 megabit service, there's a decent target for operators to shoot for anything coming down in the next 5+ years. What is the required ecosystem? Is the next question we need to answer. Most operators today largely rely on a couple of large vendors for powering their infrastructure, but this is also self-limiting in many ways, as the rate of innovation is tied to the incumbents' skills and business models. Ideally, operators would like to partner with best-of-breed suppliers to stay in step with the rapidly changing customer tastes and requirements. Finally, what is the right operational and business model? Build it and they will come models are very CapEx heavy. Invest as you grow models are preferable while deploying broadband infrastructure to this new underserved markets. So at ONF, a not-for-profit industry organization, these are the questions we have been tasked to answer by the industry's leading operators and aligned vendor partners. Over the past decade, ONF has developed and demonstrated a unique model that brings together technologies from SDN, NFV, and cloud with value proposition of disaggregation and softwareization to deliver open source platforms that leverage white box hardware and merchant silicon and over merchant silicon. Our membership Particularly, our top tier members are leading the industry in trailblazing this bold path by deploying solutions based on ONF platforms in their production access networks. And in doing so, they are demonstrating by example the benefits of ONF's curated open source approach. Our visionary operator-led ONF board sits on top of this organization. And in a few minutes, you will hear from our board member, Jochen Appel and Robert Sakup of DT about their Access 4.0 project and how it leverages ONF's platforms. And as I said, tomorrow's keynotes will feature Turk Telecom's update on their production deployments of ONF platforms. This active leadership de-risks the adoption of open networking approach for the rest of the industry. And many of the 200 plus member companies are closely following the lead of the top tier partners who are blazing the trail. In addition to their thought leadership in driving ONF's agenda and mission forward, our partner members have invested more than $100 million towards shared R&D at ONF. ONF delivers through its independent engineering team and sizable deliverables, and this output accrues to the industry and hence to the public as a whole. ONF boasts major open source projects across broadband, and I'm going to briefly walk you through those, and you'll hear a lot about it over the next day or two, as well as in the recorded sessions. So the two sides of the platforms are the components are the SDN and edge infrastructure components. Many of you are aware of these and are using this. Open networking operating system, ONOS, forms the SDN control and data plane infrastructure piece. Trellis is the leaf spine fabric. CORD, which stands for Central Office Re-architected as a data center, is the edge cloud infrastructure. On top of this, we have built the solutions and platforms, almost like a Russian doll, where everything builds on top of each other. And the first one and the most important one, which we are going to talk about today, is SDN-enabled broadband access, SEBA, which has key components for virtualizing the hardware, the access network, as well as some components which go into the core networking piece, which are being developed today, software-defined BNG. We also have projects in the mobility side and the 5G world, and those are also now gaining a lot of momentum, as you'll hear in the future. Today's presentation and webinar, we are focusing on the SEBA side. But nothing succeeds like success, as they say. So it is important to see that these projects have been adopted and are paving a path to the optimal path to the universal broadband. Trellis has been in production for a year plus at Comcast. SEBA is in production at Turk Telecom today, and you'll hear more about it tomorrow. AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, and Telefonica have been in trials with this for a long time and now are starting the path to production. By end of the year, we are hoping that at least two of these, if not all, would be in production. And there's active interest from many more operators, and I've named a few: British Telecom, Liberty Global, NBN in Australia, and Telecom Italia in Italy. Similarly, the mobile side is starting to get traction. It's already in production at T-Mobile Poland, the core piece, and it's going into trials and at other operators and our partners. As I said, ONF is organizing dedicated spotlights to cover the mobile and P4 activities. So we will be talking about the CBA, and that's the focus for this spotlight. Over the past 24 months, CBA platform has been hardened by ONF with a very active community support. As I mentioned, it's already scaled for production use by suppliers like Netsia, Redisys, and others. You can hear more about these solutions in the supplier plenary talk, which was recorded and will be available at the end of the day today. Let's have a quick look under the hood at CBA. That this platform holds the key to unlocking that $1 trillion opportunity, which I'm here to talk to you about today. So ONF partners have inspired ONF operators specifically have inspired ONF to reimagine the PON infrastructure and take this vertically integrated, hardware-oriented solution and disaggregate it and SDNize it into what we call CBA, SDN-enabled broadband access. And that reference design, which the operators wrote, including Deutsche Telekom, AT&T, and Telecom, was published in March 2019. It's available on our website, and it defines several key control components of the PON infrastructure being implemented in software, following SDN principles, while the data plane primarily stays in the hardware data plane. This reference design has been implemented as open source platform that we call the CBA exemplar. This is ONF's flagship open source platform for wireline broadband. It is a successor to the residential core or R-core solution which preceded it. As you see, it is composed of key open source components developed over the last 5 to 7 years at ONF, including the SDN controller ONOS, the hardware abstraction layer Volta, and the network edge mediator, which provides an northbound to the orchestration systems of the operators. All of this works on OCP compliant white box hardware, white box OLTs, white box switches, and standard off-the-shelf servers. You'll hear a detailed update on this project tomorrow in the keynote by Saurav, our VP of Engineering, as well as the 20-odd recordings which have been contributed by the community, which will be available on our website. So the next few minutes, I want to focus on the potential impact of ONF CBA, what impact it's having on delivery of broadband. Softwareized and programmable infrastructure enables deep automation and efficient use of shared platforms and components. So that brings the operational efficiency to bear. Equally importantly, the cloud-inspired innovations like CI/CD, A/B testing, etc., bring service delivery agility to telecom operators. And the economics and total cost of ownership are maybe the most profound impact this will have on operators and their bottom lines. The important study done by AD Little with help of leading ONF operators, AT&T, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, showed this exceptional economic benefits, which we'll look at a little closely in the next slide. This is the deck, and it's available at the URL, which is, the report, the study, which is available on their website from AD Little. Let's zoom into the key studies findings. So the excess CapEx study talked about a 40% change from a traditional central office to a virtualized central office using CORD-like architecture or CBA-like architecture. And the CapEx savings accrued primarily from proprietary hardware being replaced by white box, as well as some additional compute and hardware networking related costs were added. So that's the plus and minus which you see on the chart on the left. Similarly, excess OPEX was calculated by a little to be a 25% decrease. And as you see, uh, the maintenance and labor, which are typically proportional to capex in the current incumbent models, they got reduced in proportion to the capex. Similarly, the second part, which is also equally important, is the additional revenue which the CEBA-like access architectures could generate for operators. And this was the analysis they did, where 5% of operator internal revenue could be increased by offering services which are typically easy for them to implement without a lot of new software being added to their plate. But then, given that there is compute available now in their central offices, they could onboard third-party services and bring those services, if they don't want to develop them themselves, to the market, adding another 6% plus of revenue opportunity. So this is an important document, captures the thoughts and experiences of the three leading ONF operators, and I would recommend everyone read this carefully. And quickly, before I conclude, I want to just show that operators who have these savings or accrue the savings will redirect the excess spend towards differentiated services. The legacy mix today is, secret sauce makes up about 20% or so of a typical offering by an incumbent vendor. When you start using open networking, you can reduce that part significantly, and most of the operators' spend can now be put to use towards premium differentiated software and new services, rather than spending, paying money for undifferentiated software, which you can accrue from the shared R&D at places like ONF and CEBA. In summary, open networking holds the key to unlock this $1 trillion opportunity to deploy and future-proof your broadband infrastructure. That's the right way of making the most out of this crisis-induced urgency, in my opinion. The production-ready broadband platform CEBA offers a huge head start to the industry to build and deploy commercial solutions with attractive economics. And our tier one operators and dynamic new suppliers are leading from the front, helping the rest of us, the rest of the industry, to substantially reduce the market and technology risk of adopting this approach. This is the call to action. I want you to add your important voice and resources to accelerate this march towards the well-connected world. I'll close by borrowing this popular song's title from the musical Hamilton. Thank you for your time and attention.
Aseem, thank you so much. That was great.